On the Breakfast Grille this morning, a man who needs no introduction the world over, our Malaysian Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir. Thank you for joining us on the grill this morning. Tun, let's start with the laments that the corporate world have with our currency and our share markets. Both are displaying great signs of weaknesses. What is the Pakatan Harapan government doing about it?
What Pakatan Harapan can do is constrained by what we inherit from the previous government. And what we inherit is a huge debt and undermining the administrative machinery. We have to attend to that first. Yes, we can have a policy or a target vision of what we want to do, but that is constrained by lack of funds, and they were trying to get the machinery of government to again function well. So our main objective is to recover from the effects of the previous government's huge borrowings and not running the country according to the rule of law. That we have to overcome. Then, of course, if we recover, then we can have a proper vision as to what we want to do for the country.
Well, you used the word if. Presumably you mean the word when. The Ministry of Finance has talked about the debt levels being at about R1 trillion, and the market is wondering how does Malaysia grow itself out of that R1 trillion in debts?
Well, in the first place, we are trying to cover the money that has been lost. Some of the money has been confiscated by Singapore government, by the American government. We expect to recover that money because we have a right to that money. We can show our right to that money because the money comes from Malaysia, 1MDB in particular. And secondly, of course, we need to look into raising funds through selling assets. There are some government assets which we can dispose of and raise money. Beyond that, of course, we are using some of our revenue to pay the debts and to service the loan.
The most immediate asset sales which would move the needle to reduce the R1 trillion of debt, which ones would they be?
ECRL, for example. Now, ECRL, the contract price was about 55 to 60 billion. Now, we just cannot go on. In fact, we would like to drop the whole project if we can. But if you drop the project, you have to compensate. And the compensation is very big because the previous government had already committed themselves to an agreement which placed us in a very difficult position. So what we have done is to renegotiate. And we have done this, we have reduced the scope, we have saved something like 20 billion ringgit. So that's quite a substantial sum, although compared to the 1 trillion ringgit that has been borrowed, that is quite small.
The reduction in cost for ECRL is about 20 billion ringgit, as you say, Tun. Which other asset sales might move the needle?
We are postponing the implementation of the high-speed train for 2 years. That will be less of a strain on our resources. We have also cancelled several other projects which we find are not immediately necessary.
Do the asset sales, as you envisage, include existing assets within for example, the GLC framework or other existing Malaysian assets, which might have been deemed in the past of Malaysian national interest?
In terms of asset sale, we have some property which we are not in need of at the moment, and they can fetch good prices. We'll sell them for whatever value that they may have. Normally, the amount is not very big, but still, the accumulated amount will be quite big.
Would these be properties in the Iskandar region in South Johor, for example, or in Penang of the Reclaimed Islands, for example? What details?
I don't think so, because the property in Johor has already been sold and the money has been paid, not to us. And she has paid to the person who sold the land. So that is not what we are looking for. There are certain commitments which we have willy-nilly we have to accept. by a commitment made by the owner. But beyond that, we have certain assets. For example, we have some properties, some land, which we may not want to use. There may be certain projects which require land, and perhaps we can raise some funds from that.
Is it possible to provide some details behind that, Tun?
Well, at the moment I cannot, because we are in the process of negotiating, and we have to find a good price for our. We have properties, for example, in Hong Kong. We have properties in Singapore. We have properties in other countries also.
Okay, so not within the Malaysian territory.
Not only we are at home.
Yesterday, Dato Sri Azmin Ali's Ministry of Economic Affairs shared their roadmap for what they call the Shared Prosperity Vision, a 10-year roadmap between 2021 to 2030, envisaging a decent standard of living for all Malaysians. What are some of those details behind that plan?
Well, we notice that the distribution of wealth in this country is not even, and also not even fair. For example, between urban and rural, there is a great disparity. We need to make corrections on that. Between state and state, some states are very rich, some states are very poor. That also we have to make correction. We have a problem with performance of some ethnic groups. For example, the Bumiputera, including the Bumiputera in Sabah, Sarawak. They are rather poor by comparison to the people of other races living elsewhere. All these things have been looked at, and we feel that we need to redistribute wealth in a fair way, because if there is great disparity, then there will be antagonism, and that antagonism may increase over time to the point where it may break out into some violence.
Does the social contract remain a key part of your wealth redistribution agenda, Tun?
Yes, it is a part of it.
Do you reimagine that, those parameters being redrawn?
Not fully. If we have the parameters that is unachievable, we need to rethink, because it is quite obvious there are certain things which we have found out now that we are in the government, that what we had thought when we were in opposition would be good for the government. We find that there are certain things which cannot be done without high cost for the government.
In your opinion, what can be achieved with a social contract and what could not be achieved with a social contract?
Well, the disparity sometimes is very big, and that's not easy. There is a divide between town and country, but that is made worse because town is people by different people from those in the country. To correct that means we have to move people from the country into the town. But if we move people from the town into the country will just, the people living in the country will just suffer more.
So what can be done, in your opinion, to really, wealth redistribution is a very difficult agenda. It's a problem the world over. What's the Malaysian solution?
Affirmative action is one of the things we have tried. It was not a total failure. Quite a number of people benefited from that. But when you give opportunities to people who are unable to manage, they fail. If it is because they don't have the opportunity or the capital, we can make correction. But the ability of the people concerned is not the same. Some of them, their culture-wise, they are really not suitable for going into business, for example.
So how do you solve that problem?
Train them.
How?
Well, we know where their weaknesses are. We have to bring them in. We have to train them in management. so that they will not make too many mistakes.
So, in your opinion, it's an educational issue, not a cultural issue, or even
It is an educational issue, it is a cultural issue, it is an educational issue because in the school we don't train people how to manage things. Now we have to focus on financing and management and things like that, so that when they graduate or they leave school, they will know something about how to do business. The other thing is cultural. Cultural refers to value system. If your value system is not suitable for certain kind of activity, you are going to fail. For example, if you are laid back, obviously you're not going to be as successful as activists, people who want to do work, who are keen to work hard.
Do you think much has changed in the culture of the Malay population since your book, The Malay Dilemma, in the early 70s?
Much I will not say, but a little change has taken place.
Over the next 2 years, a lot of market observers suggest that there could be a recession on the horizon. Do you fear it might affect Malaysia?
This country, if well managed, can escape recession. We have been attacked before, very severe attacks. We have come out of it without going into recession. So we feel that we have with us people who are very conscious about this thing, who knows some way of avoiding very big decline in the economy.
Tun, you've used quite a lot of ifs and maybes in the last 10 minutes. You suggest that maybe there's many dependencies on the outcomes that you suggest. Is Malaysia well managed at this point in time to overcome these potential difficulties?
Yeah, but when you are trying to do something that will have an effect in the future, you can make assumptions. But when you make assumptions, these are assumptions. It may not happen, so the word if has got to be used to balance it, to cushion it. Otherwise, we are so certain that we can do this thing, and then we find that certain other circumstances prevent us from doing. So when predicting the future, I would suggest that people use the word if.
Yes, absolutely. But are there one or two things, even at the very most basic minimum, that can allow Malaysia to overcome these external challenges?
Yeah, I think Malaysia has had a history of being able to tackle external changes, make adjustments, and find our own way out of this crisis that occurs.
Okay, so you've mentioned quite a few success stories in the last 1.5 years since coming to power, but nonetheless, weaknesses exist. I think most notably when management of the country is concerned, it's the succession plan. And many people lament the lack of a concrete timetable for handover to Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim. How do you comment?
Let me go into what did not happen. In most instances, when there is a change of government, there will be riots and strikes and things like that, which would undermine the government. That did not happen. The change was smooth. And since this is a government of 5 different parties, that it could stay together this length of time is an achievement. Not many countries have managed. Even with a coalition of 2 parties, they cannot manage. But here we have 5 parties, and to get 5 parties to agree to anything requires some patience and time. But we have survived. Until this moment, there has been no very strong tendency towards a breakup. Yes, there are some people at the fringes who are not satisfied and they voice their thoughts, but that is okay. That is democracy. But the main thing is this government has succeeded in staying together, in tackling many issues together, in trying to solve the financial problem, as well as having to work with government machinery that we, as the opposition, had before not been very friendly towards. Now we have to work with them, and they may find they do find difficulty adjusting to a new set of people whom they did not like in the past, and the elected leaders, the ministers, to also find difficulty trying to work with people who were critical of them before.